Alright guys, we have got some tactics trainer videos going on today. Let's see what's going to happen. I set the rating level for about up to, let's just say, under 1300. I decided not to continue the 2500 and over problems for today. That'll be another time I need to do that when I'm fully concentrated, and I don't think I'm in my best shape at the moment. I think that's why I'm not going to do it right now. But anyways, let's see what's happening in this problem right here. The king is wide open. What do you do? That is interesting. I mean, rook c8 looks normal. Queen g4, that looks like a good move too. Queen g4 and with king e8, then queen g6, and that looks like checkmate. Okay, so queen g4, king e7, queen g5, king f8, queen. It's not okay. Then queen takes d8. Okay, that probably does work actually. So queen g4, this check is going to do the job here. Okay, I didn't even bother past that. I mean, that's a bit of a silly problem, to be honest. Not a silly problem. Sorry, I take that back. Kind of a weird problem. Silly in the idea that you're trying to look at the variations beyond this. But the idea is important to know that the king is trapped here by the queen and the rook right here, taking away the d8 and the c7 squares, and this check along this diagonal is attacking the c8 square, so the king is unable to retrieve, and now the king has to retreat to either the e8 or e7 squares, where it will be in very, very serious trouble here. So not a very good situation for the black king there. Let's move on to the next problem, guys. d4. So the first move that I see is, I would say I've got to move my rook. I can't move to f3, and I can only move to e4. And if I go rook e4, one thing I notice is that this queen is attacked, and it has a couple of options to go. It can go to f3, but I think we can just take the knight right here on h4, and there's no queen h1 because of the knight covering on the g3 square. Notice that. So rook e4 is the idea, right? And our only move to defend the knight right over here is to stay in a dark square, either on somewhere on this diagonal, right? The rook is covering the rank right over here on the e4, f4, g4, h4 squares. So the queen is to go on f6, e7, or d8, or the only move it can go without dropping is g5 immediately. But after queen g5, we see that the queen is in an unfortunate spot where the rook can swing over to the g4 square, attack the queen, and what's important is that this queen cannot move from this position, right? So the queen can't go back because it's actually just pinned to the king right over here. The king is in an unfortunate spot right here. I think this is the solution, and I'm going to play that, guys. And okay, I mean, so the idea is clear. So if we kind of go back to this, the idea is that rook e4 is pretty much just met by queen g5. Sorry about the clicking, guys. I don't have a mouse. I think I might have mentioned that, or maybe I didn't. But after rook g4, white wins pretty much, and queen f3 is, of course, running into this, and black doesn't have any threats. So, yeah, once again, guys, my mouse clicking might be a little bit annoying, but hopefully it's bearable. Could be worse. Okay. That looks very surprising. I'm a little bit unsure at the moment what to do, but I think I see an idea. Notice that there's a lot of pieces hanging in this position, so one approach might be knight takes on the d7 square, and if bishop takes, we see that queen. Okay, so the idea is that you got to look at all captures first. First, we can rule out bishop takes e7. The queen would just recapture, and there's nothing really here. You can't play queen h4 because the queen is going to be able to capture you on the h4 square. This next idea that you might look at is queen h4 check, right? The king would have to move then, since nothing can block the file here. Probably to g8. That's the only legal move. And The only problem is your bishop's hanging here in the g5 square. Although, is that really a problem though? The more I look at that, why doesn't that work? And I'm a little bit curious on why knight takes d7 doesn't work either. Knight takes d7 followed by knight takes f8. Both of these are very good moves, but queen h4 just wins a piece, right? So there's a couple of ideas here. Knight takes d7, bishop takes g5, that looks like the only good move, and knight takes f8. I'm quite unsure why we are not able to play this continuation. That looks very acceptable for us. But okay, we'll choose the one that that wins the most material. I'm just now seeing that queen h4 followed by bishop takes e7 is actually winning the rook on f8, so this is actually a much better move. And notice that the king had to go back, and now we have a double attack on this bishop with this queen x-raying along this diagonal, so we just capture the bishop right here and win. I'm curious about this position. Knight d7 is quite normal, but yeah, knight takes d7 is pretty good for white. So I think this is a faulty problem because, and in a normal game, most of the time white will win this position because the exchange is quite enough for white to win this position. Black's king is wide open here, and okay, black has the bishop pair, and he has a very solid center right here, but that's my case that, you know, this is a misleading evaluation. During a game, I would suspect that we would think that black would have pretty decent, but not sufficient compensation, but very decent compensation for the exchange. Not enough, though. But alright, I digress there. Right. Okay. I think I see the main kind of theme in this position. Whenever you look at a chess position, you've got to look at the captures here first. And the first one that comes to mind is even like rook takes e5, right? Notice that if the pawn captures the rook, this file is being opened right here. We see this tension here along the file right here. We've got to be really careful. So if rook takes e5, white can't play d takes e5 because that would hang the rook. But the problem is, if rook takes e5, white doesn't have to take with the pawn. He can take with the knight. And after rook takes e5, knight takes e5, I don't see an immediately clear way to proceed. Okay, black might be a little bit better after bishop d5, but that's no tactic really. Or even rook c7, rook c8. Maybe black is a bit better. I don't know how much, but that's not really the point of the puzzle. The point of this puzzle is tactics. And what you need to keep in mind is that there are other kinds of tactics in this position. You got to look at all the captures. So okay, rook f3 we can rule out, of course. I mean, g takes f3. You're not really getting enough compensation for the rook compared to the knight. The rook is just a clearly more valuable piece. But what we have to notice is that we can also take the knight with the bishop here on the f3 square. So the idea is that if bishop takes f3, we're also attacking both rooks at once. So if white's not able to play rook takes f5, because we are able to capture the rook here on d1, and this rook is also hanging. So we're up a piece at the end of that line, for example. If bishop takes f3, g takes f3, this is the critical line. You've got to see that, okay, white has equal material for the moment, but we have this theme of the d file being very relevant. So after bishop takes f3, g takes f3, rook takes e5, d takes e5, it's almost like white's out of the woods, but we can capture the rook on d1 and black wins there. So we're actually winning material in this line, I think. Yep, and I think this is the relatively best line that white has, but he's going to be down a piece for very little compensation. So not very nice to come across, but a very important tactic with some in-between moves that you have to watch out for, like bishop takes f3. Very nice one. Wow, I find that remarkable, but okay. It's the normal way of proceeding. Let's say if it was black to move and you didn't see the best move. I think we would just push the pawn and perhaps have probably it's just still losing, right? Probably it's losing for black. Yeah, never mind, guys. But the main idea is that we have checkmate in this position. Notice that this pawn is on the g2 square. The king is on h3. The king has the h2 square only, but we can check him and take away both of them. This rook is a great X-raying square along this file, and the king is on the edge of the board. Kings on the edge of the board are particularly vulnerable, let's say, in open positions, even in the center. But it's more common to see the kings on the flanks, I would say, in these types of positions where there's just so few pieces on the board. Okay, and then there's that computer-like mate, but giving back the queen, but it's not enough, of course. So I'm going to turn down my volume, guys. I'm just wondering a bit loud for me. Okay. Ooh, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Okay. Okay, the first idea is that rook takes f7. The immediate recapture is just met by bishop takes d6, and I think white is doing excellently there, given that the rook here is supporting this. Even rook takes d6 is possible, but bishop takes d6 is the right approach, I think. Sorry about that. If you heard bad noise, guys, I didn't mean that. The next idea that we have to look at is, we can always take this bishop. Let's see, bishop takes f4. Then this knight, I think it's trapped there, actually. So that's interesting. Let's see, bishop takes f4. What if he captures here with the bishop? Maybe we just take the bishop then. Right, we probably do take the bishop then. And the knight. Sorry about that, guys. You just saw the switch in time there. I had to address something that happened. I had to take care of a more important matter just for a second. Let's see that again. Let's see. We see bishop takes f4, queen takes e6. This was the main idea. And I think we can just get away with capturing the knight here on the f7 square. I don't think that queen takes e4 is sufficient. I think we're just up a piece at the end of that line. So I'm going to roll with that. I think that's the best line. And I think this is a pretty instructive problem since there's a lot of stuff going on here. Let's see, knight takes f7, bishop takes f4. Of course, this is the only move. And the problem ends here, but I think the critical line is queen takes e6. Yeah, I think we can just capture here. And after captures here, well, that looks sufficient for a win. White's forced to take this. Oh, that's why. Okay, I just noticed that the rook is hanging here, so rook e8 or rook f8 first. Okay, guys. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And now we go king h8 next turn, and I think we're doing very, very fine. I think there's also possibilities to even take on h2, but I'd rather get my king to safety first. So that line is winning material. We just want to pay attention to the material values, what's worth more in this position, and we're up a piece in that line, so that's got to be good for us. Notice that there's a lot of captures in this position that you've got to look at, and you just got to notice that. Okay. I'm just a little very surprised actually. Why isn't this winning a piece? Let's see. D takes e5. If I capture this knight first, notice that this is the most obvious recapture. Knight takes c6. B takes c6. We are up 2 pieces in this line. And even if he plays d4, we can just play bishop takes d4. And if rook takes d4, rook takes d4, f takes d3, we're up a lot of material. I don't understand this problem at all. Isn't it just we just got to capture this and nothing much is happening? The key idea is that the bishop is pinning this out pawn to the king right over here, so white's not really able to take the knight here as he wants to in a normal situation because the bishop's pinning that big to the king. So all we have to do is reduce the threats. I'm not sure what the idea is, but we can just take that one too. We don't really mind the pawn structure here because after this we're up a very large amount of material. And I'm questioning the level of difficulty on that kind of problem. I think I don't think that's a very that's not a problem you can really learn a lot from, in my opinion. I'm very just questioning the legitimacy of that one. Just taking the knight is the the automatic move that everybody goes through, and I mean, I'm not really sure why would they include that one. So, all right, guys, moving on. Right, right. Okay, I think I see the idea of this problem. It's a very nice problem too. Notice that we have our own back row problems right here. If we give black a move, let's say we play h3 or h4, right? Then I think just queen d1 or queen c1, or it's just going to be checkmate in like 2 moves or something. So we have to find some way to prevent it or look for our own threats. We also have to notice that black has his own back row problems. So moves like queen a8 check, rook b8 check are completely normal. Sometimes you can even sacrifice your queen, queen takes c7, queen takes c7, to somehow get back row. These back row checkmates with rook b8. But unfortunately, the queen can capture that. So we have to somehow make this work, I think. That's the only way to somehow proceed in this position. Let's see. Queen a8 is met by rook c8. And unfortunately, rook b8 is met by queen c1 checkmate in like 2 moves. So that's, or 1 move even. So it's not very nice for us. Queen a8, it's just not working. The other idea is that maybe we can check with the rook first. And if rook b8, well then black only has 1 move, rook c8. And the idea is that we don't just give up right here. Our rook can take a rook might want to take the rook here, but after queen takes rook right here, I think we're just down a couple of pawns for no compensation in this queen endgame. A nightmarish position to defend. Also not very easy to win, but clearly a nightmarish position to try to defend for white. The best idea is actually rook b8 and rook c8. And in this position, what we have to notice is the theme of adding another attacker to the back row with check. The important thing is everything coming with check. So rook b8, and now the very, very nice queen sacrifice idea with queen d8 is completing the back row here. The black rook is forced to capture there, and after this is actually checkmate. Very, very nice problem right here. I think that's a very nice one idea to remember, to place that piece right next to it and remove that defender right over there. Yeah, the back rank is clearly a major issue in this problem. Let's see. Okay. I see a couple of themes in this problem I'm just a little interested in. Unfortunately, we cannot go queen c5 because of rook a8, I think. And also queen c5, bishop e3 is not very nice either. Okay, we need to keep that in mind. The idea is that, okay, we can try to look at the captures here first. If rook takes a7, then queen takes d1. Does this position really give us anything concrete? I don't think so. Black is a bit better maybe, but because he has active pieces after rook takes a7, queen takes d1, but I don't see an immediate follow-up. The important part is to notice immediate follow-ups in these themes, and one of them is just capturing the bishop here. I think this just wins the game right away. And the idea is after rook takes c1, this rook can capture, but we can capture with our queen. There's no way for this queen to attack this rook, and this is just simply winning the game, I think. So rook takes c1 is good, and if it gives that check, we can always drop back the rook. That's a key defensive retreating idea that you want to keep in mind. This rook can laterally move up and down, or not laterally, vertically move. Excuse me, guys, for that misuse in terminology. So that's a pretty nice problem, that last one. Just a nice one to remember. Not sure what the idea of this problem is just yet. Looks very unusual. I don't actually spot the idea immediately. Okay, and that what helps to see is that this problem involves a lot of checks. So what we have to look is that, okay, this knight really can't move away. You can't really get away with sacrificing an f7. You're probably not going to capture anything in this position on the first move. But we also have checks and forcing moves, other kinds of forcing moves to look at first. So our first move that we probably should look at is knight f6. And after that, we kind of notice that, okay, the h7 square is taken because of the knight on f6, and the king would only have f8 and h8 to run to. Notice that the f7, g7 squares are taken by black's own pieces. Let's see, knight f6, king h8, knight takes f7, checkmate is quite a beautiful checkmate, actually. We just capture the pawn, fork the king and rook, but it's checkmate, so you don't even get to take the rook. But that's our ultimate goal, to get checkmate. So let's see that again. Knight f6, king h8, it does not work, and the king f8 is the only move, but then we would have the other knight swoop in from g5 and checkmate black on the h7 square. The idea being is that the e file is cut off, and knight f6, king f8, knight h7 is also checking, but checking the black king, but the f6 knight is covering the g8 square. So there's no retreat square for black, and this is just a good and very nice instructive idea that how the knights can really toy with the king here. Very nice problem. Right, okay. This is an important kind of theme. Notice that we're in check, so our immediate things that we have to look at is, can we take the queen? No, we cannot take the queen. Also, there are three moves whenever you're encountered with the check that, there are three ideas that you can, whenever you're encountered with the check, that you can try. One is just capture the piece that's checking you. One is blocking the check that is checking you. And one is just moving out of the check that's checking you. And these are the three kind of themes that you want to keep in mind. So the first idea that probably you should look at is just, can you take the piece that's checking you? No, you can't really. But you can always look at, okay, can I block the check that's checking me? And in this case, you can't really with this rook. That would be the normal move, rook e8. But this queen would probably go back to g5, and black is probably better in that position. And he probably should win this position easily under normal circumstances, but it wouldn't be a tactics trainer problem if it was that easy. So we can't make it that easy, right? We can also move the king d8, but I don't know. Queen g4 looks like pretty half decent for white, I think, and doesn't look so terrible. The main idea, what you've got to notice is that, okay, we also have this bishop attacking the king right over here. If the rook moves anywhere at once, we get to check first. And what we eventually notice is that we're able to move the rook back to the f8 square, give this check, and block our own check. Quite a very beautiful idea that comes up quite a number of times. You can block a check and make your own check sometimes. This often happens in the endgame when the king has to move when it's in front of a rook and the other king is somehow in the opposing file or rank and the king is giving a check. I think that's a very, very nice idea. The same kind of idea happens with knight discovered checks with smothered mates. That comes up as well quite a lot. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, then I can make some kind of video on those kind of mating patterns that you want to keep in mind. Okay, in this position, black is doing pretty well in material, but white has a number of pawns that he can play with. Our first idea is that, okay, our knight is hanging, and we can't really do anything about that. We can only really move the knight, and the only two, I don't know, d5 doesn't look like a bad square, but we only have two checks in this position. We've always got to look at those checks, right? So knight e2 is unfortunately not working because of king f2. And if we go knight h3, we're actually covering that f2 square. So let's see, knight h3, the f2 square is covered, g1 square is covered by the knight right here, the h2 square is covered, the rook f1 square is covered by the rook. And after this check, I think there was only the g2 and h1 squares that white can go to, but it turns out this bishop is just a monster on this diagonal. So g2 and h1 are covered, and white is actually checkmated in this position. Very, very nice maiden one that you want to keep in mind here. It's a key of recognizing what squares are covered and which ones are not. So that's a very important idea. Okay, I think I immediately just spotted the idea. So what we want to keep in mind is that this position is technically just loose for black. We've got a very unprotected bishop here on the G4 square. The queen is somewhat weirdly placed on the F6 square. I wish the queen was perhaps on E7 and that the knight was on F6. Or even better, that the queen was on G7 and the knight was on F6. Black would have a very solid formation here to defend his position. The only problem with this kind of formation for black is that it's not his move, and white can take advantage of this opportunity to play a move that let's say reduces the attack. So I think the idea is we have to look at checkmating threats on the H7 square. One idea is that knight G5 is the normal move, but perhaps the problem with this move, or the idea is, okay, knight takes G5, knight G5, knight takes G5, we have H takes G5, the bishop is hanging, and we are threatening checkmate on H5, and that's not a very good position for black. Black's in trouble there. We have a very, very dangerous attack since we've opened up and moved the pawn over here. We've opened up the H file. That's not good for black. Let's see, knight G5. The only problem that I see with this move is that black can play queen F4, and that's a check, and we probably don't want to block the diagonal here. Maybe we do. I'm not really sure. Maybe we can just play king B1, and we're threatening the knight here, and black can't take there because that would open up the H file, like we said, for this rook to come and crash down here. But let's see, knight G5, queen F4, king B1. There would be a somewhat decent opportunity to play knight F6 here, but I'm not seeing as of yet what you should do there. Yeah, guys, I'm not seeing the immediate idea here, as I guess I'm being a bit slow. So knight G5, queen F4, king B1, knight F6. Maybe the idea is that we can play the pawn to G3, and now after the queen is on F4, right? Or like knight F6, G3, right? Then that position I was talking about earlier. I think the idea is that this queen is lacking squares. It's a bit hard for a beginner problem, to be honest. I think that's quite a difficult problem to figure out if you're not king B1 immediately. Forgive me, guys. Knight G5 is the idea. Okay, and queen F4 is the best move by far, but they gave this silly move, and I don't like that at all. So queen takes G7 followed by bishop takes G4 is the main line, but I think the best continuation, maybe, even though the computer doesn't seem to agree, is I think the best move is queen F4. It doesn't agree. And if I go queen F4, I was thinking that we could play king B1. We're threatening this checkmate on H7, so we can't play knight takes G5 because of H takes, so we have to play knight F6. Now G3 is attacking this queen. This queen would have to move, probably to F2. That looks like the only move. We can take the bishop right here, and now white's up a piece, I think, because knight takes G4, queen H7 is the checkmating idea. It's a bit of a hard problem, though. I mean, to be honest, I think this is the more critical and testing line here. I don't think that's really a fair problem for this session. I think I was a bit thrown off there. Yeah, I feel like that tactic needs to be made longer, and the rating would be more appropriate for that one. All right, guys. I think we can. In this position, what I'm noticing is that this rook is only defended by the king, and we have a very, very deadly battery right here. Let's say if we could pretend to move our knight, right? Let's say if we can move it to d5, and it was our move again, we could take the rook on f7 with our rook here on f3. Our queen is supporting that. Our queen is supporting everything in the file, so if we could get away with that, then that would be great. But the problem is after knight d5, then black rook takes f3. and that's not necessarily so good for us. Sure, black's king is somewhat weak, but I don't think that that's that bad of a problem, so it should be okay for him. Let's see. Next, our ideas might come across to be like some kind of check. So if we could play like knight h5 or knight e7, right? Knight e8, check, and then we can, next move force. Let's say we're able to take the rook. Knight takes d7 doesn't work here in this instance because of rook takes d7, I think. And we're still covering the f7 square since our rook is covering this laterally. This position of pieces is not so terrible actually for white. The key is to recognize, okay, we've got to check the black king, make sure this rook doesn't move at all. It can't move at all, and then we're able to capture it next move. Unfortunately, knight e8 looks kind of normal, but I think we were able to capture up the queen, and the f7 square is defended not only by the king now, but also by the queen on e8. That's a very important theme to notice, and the key is to notice that knight h5 is the best move, because after knight h5, rook takes f7 cannot be prevented, and knight h5, the pawn captures the knight, rook takes f7, check, king, I don't know, somewhere, rook takes d7 is winning a bunch of material, and probably it's going to be checkmate soon. It's not a very, very nice position to play for black. Not a very nice position at all. Very nice problem though. I like the way that that problem can be figured out. Okay. Well, one thing I noticed is that there are a lot of captures in this position, but it's probably around this area with the king where the king is very, very exposed here. Let's see. I know that the e file is cut off, and if I could just, let's say, play, I don't know, some kind of check, the king would be almost checkmated. It's got so few squares. And let's see. I can't play queen takes d4 because of king e1. So one idea that I immediately noticed is that I want to prevent this retreating square from ever having I want to prevent the white king from having this retreating square. And the first idea I really think of is queen b4 check, right? And the king is still stuck in the center. But I think the problem with queen b4 is that king c1 or king c2 can be played, or probably king c1. But this is not so clear, I think, anymore. If that happens, the king is relatively safe there. The key idea is to recognize, okay, I've cut off all these squares right here, and I've also cut off all the squares along the e file and the c file. The bishop here on e2 is taking away your square for the king. The rook on d1 is taking the square away from the king. All we need to do is give a check to white, and I think it should be good. But how do we maintain that? And the key is just to recognize that this bishop can just come in on the b4 square, take away that e1 retreating square that we desperately need to take away, and this is actually winning the game. Very, very nice problem, guys. Sorry about that noise adjustment if you heard anything again. Okay, we just had this problem. Let's just go through that again. Sorry about that, guys. That's just a repeat problem. Forgive chess.com for that one. That sometimes happens. Okay, interesting. Wow, there is a lot of checks here, and I don't know where to even start. It's all looking very good. Okay, we can't move this bishop. One thing I noticed is that we can't legally move the bishop here because it's illegally pinned. We're not allowed to do that. So that's very helpful to know. And we only have really like one check in this position. One good check. Rook f2 is obviously not good. So we would have to play, I think, in this position, queen g4 check. And what we have to notice is that this rook is covering every square here on the second rank, so the king can't retreat there. The queen is covering these g1 and f4 squares. The king only has really one move to go to. That's e4. The pawn is also covering the e3 square, so the king is running out on squares here. So let's see. After king e4, what's our main idea? what we have to keep in mind is that after king e4, let's say queen g4, king e4, we have to give another check, right? So I think we can probably deliver either a pawn check or, let's say, a knight check, you know? Let's see, if pawn check, king e5, I mean, black's king is basically checkmated somehow here. I have a very good feeling that this should be ending in a very bad position. But I don't think it's going to. Unfortunately, I think queen g4, king e4, knight f6 is the right approach, as you know the king is still asked to be barged up the board, but now that the pawn is here, not here on the f5 square, the f5 square is vacated, so we can bring our queen back to the f5 square, and that's actually checkmate. Very, very nice problem, though, just to think about the ideas in this kind of position. And the key is to recognize that the knight can come here, not the pawn, of course, but the knight can come here, and now it's going to be king e5 and queen f5 checkmate. Queen g5 is also mate, I think, but that's why they had to stop this problem early. But I think it's a very, very nice problem here to keep in mind of how to think about checkmate here. Interesting problem. Okay, the first thing we immediately have to look at is just bishop takes g2, picking up the rook in the corner. After e takes f6, bishop takes h1, we got to look at forcing captures, right? There's no other move for this knight. You know, if black retreats the knight, then I think knight f3 and happens by white, and white's doing well there. So there's no other move than bishop takes g2, which is the only capture in the position I would suspect. So bishop takes g2, pawn captures knight, bishop captures rook. The idea that I want to keep in mind here, guys, is that I think white can play f3, and I think we should probably play queen takes f6 there. And, you know, maybe I think black should be able to hold on to the exchange. Maybe we could give a check on the h4 square and make it hard for white to capture this bishop in the corner. So I think that's a fine move. Yeah, I mean, this problem is a bit hard to judge from afar. I mean, from the far, it looks like our bishop's almost getting trapped, right? So if e5, and I think f3 is the only try to trap the bishop. Not really sure what to do though. Queen takes f3, f6 is good though, right? And maybe white would proceed with bishop b3. And we could still give this check though. Bishop f2 is met by queen takes h2. Yeah, I think this is the right way of proceeding. I wonder if queen f2 is any good. The idea being maybe we can try to trap the bishop here. Is perhaps possible. Not sure about that, guys. I don't feel like the problem gives us any kind of justice here, since we're not able to complete the problem at all. We can also try to not play the check and just keep on attacking the f3 square. Notice that this knight is extremely awkward to develop, so perhaps we can just continue with a move such as, I don't know, bishop d6. And, you know, castles, and we should be able to get the bishop out of the corner. Anyways, that's a bit of advanced, but no, still a good idea to keep in mind. You've always got to keep in mind that trap pieces are also part of these tactics. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I think this is another nice problem here. What we have to notice is that we have a very solid position for black. If black's king was on g7, I think black would pretty much draw this position. I think he could draw that with ease. But the black king is not on g7, so it's missing and not protecting some couple of key squares, like with f8 and f7. And what you have to recognize is that these are the key squares in the position. After the right move, by the way, queen f8, we're attacking the bishop. Queen c6 doesn't work because of queen g7, king g7, but queen f8 prevents king g7 to protect the bishop. And this bishop can't really go to e5 or d4, c3, b2, or a1 because the rook is hanging. There's no way to protect the bishop by the rook here on the f6 square, since the queen is, I think, able to capture it. A bit of a side note is that queen f8, rook f7, queen takes f7 is pretty obvious, but if queen f8, rook e6, queen f7 check is attacking the rook and the king here. That's important. tactic to c. And after queen f8, the relatively best move, maybe it's bishop g5, but then I would have the attacking move h4 to attack the bishop right here, and maybe black would have to part with his bishop right here. Bishop takes h4. There's no way else to protect the rook for a move, so black is losing there. So queen f8, bishop g5, h4 to attack the bishop. Bishop takes h4 is just a win for white. So I think we can conclude that this is the right position, and this is a very nice continuation. I think black would continue with bishop takes h4, g takes h4, and it should be a win for white. In about 15 moves, he'll be able to maybe bring up the king, try to attack this pawn, and simply win the game. Okay. Wow, king is wide open. What is this position? Interesting. Okay. What a bizarre position. So if I go queen takes e4, the idea is that black can play queen e5. That is not looking very convincing. But I suppose it is, right? It is probably just winning for us to play that continuation, because after queen takes e4, queen e5, we can just capture the queen, and then after the pawn captures the queen, we would have this a7 move. And there's no way to stop the promotion. That's a little bit of an unusual theme to see in this kind of position. I don't think we can go with queen takes b8 because of probably queen c3, and we're in danger of getting checkmated ourselves. So we've got to play forcing moves with check because our king's in danger. This one takes away an attacker on our king, and turns out after queen takes e5, this pawn can just promote. I think the position is maybe a little bit better for white if he plays, I don't know, e3 and just acts like material is balanced or something. I think white's maybe a little bit better. Although he does have an extra pawn in that. No, he does not have an extra pawn in that position. Okay, maybe white's a little bit better because of this development, but it's not even great development. But this is just promoting, and that just wins for white. So next problem. I think this will be the last problem of the session, guys. I hope it's not too much of a hassle. Okay, let's see. Checks first, right? Rook h8. The only problem with this move, rook h8, is the king can run to f7. I don't really see a great move after that, actually. Rook h8, king f7. Maybe we can capture the queen, but then if we take on g6 with the king, then the problem is our rook. Or maybe we don't take that then. Let's see. Rook h8, king f7. F takes g6. I think the king would have to run to e7. And there's no way to get away at this rook. Alright, we can take on g6. Forgive me, guys. Let's see. Rook h8, king f7 takes. I think the king takes, and white's in trouble, actually. The rook here on h8 is hanging, and there's not really anything great, I think. So maybe we can try it in the other order. Let's see. If we take the queen first, does this help accomplish anything? Maybe it does. Maybe it does. We're threatening rook h8 checkmate, right? And there's no way for black to really prevent that. Let's say if we take the queen, the only way for black to escape that, I would think, would be king f8. But now I think we would just have to take away the e7 square, and we would win. A move such as knight f5 or bishop g5 are very, very strong moves, I think, to attack black. Yeah, I think both of them win. The key idea is to recognize in this position after the solution that we're threatening the rook move over here to the h8 square, and after king f8, we can play either the knight to f5 to cover the e7 square, or the bishop on g5 to cover the e7 square to threaten this rook checkmate. And there's no way black can prevent that, I think. It's just simply just a mate. You can play all these nonsense spite moves, but like e4, or just better, e4 king e2 is just a mate in one. I mean, there's just simply no defense here. Maybe, I think knight f5 just does the job well. Rook h8 comes, it's made in a couple of moves, no matter what black does here. Knight d2 is met by king g2, I think, and that's just a mate in one then. So black is dead here. All right, guys. Thanks for sticking on with me. I hope you learned a little bit. These problems were very, very important in trying to decipher what you should be looking in your tactical skills here. It's all about those checks, captures, forcing moves, trying maybe defensive ideas, and uh, those threats that are attacking pieces are um, always the decisive factors usually in tactics. Rarely are you going to get positional kind of tactics where you were just forced to give up pieces. I mean, those hardly happen. Often position to lose games on, I would be honored to lose games on position rather than dropping pieces. I even drop quite a lot of pieces in my games. So um, the idea is that tactics are extremely important to improve your chess skills. So hope you learned something, guys. I appreciate you for sticking around with me. Peace out. And I think I'll be posting the advanced and beyond level 2500 level tactic video in the next few days. See you guys.